Okay.
Just give me one hot second here. I'm going to pull us from. All right.
There we are.
So, Mo, how in the heck is how are you, my friend?
Really, really good. How are you doing?
Good. I am just setting up Decimate Metal Fest, actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Where
It's
is
been
this?
I don't know if you can see here. We can go for a little stroll around.
I can see
It's
it.
been a little bit crazy, but it's so fun. Hold on.
That's awesome. Is it actually an all metal festival?
Yeah.
That's
It
badass.
totally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So we got stage crew setting up. We got some barriers going in. We got some vendors. I mean, it's the day before, so we still got a long ways to go, but yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. It's crazy. So it's 27 metal bands. We got 4 DJs in there. We got some drag kings, some drag queens. We got someone with an acoustic, yeah.
Wow, that sounds awesome. And it's all indoors, so it doesn't matter about the weather.
Yeah, we are not worried about the weather. And then, but I'm just gonna stroll around because it's just you and I right now. Anyways, we're just chilling. Let's see. Well, we'll go for a little walk. So it's amazing because it's like a couple of days. So we have like Friday all day Friday, and then Saturday. We got like pancake breakfast for everyone that's like camping out and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we got like a wicked campsite set up. It's like Lions Club, so they already know what's going on. It's like a golf green out there. It's amazing.
That's wicked.
Yeah. And Prairie Fire Productions is like making it happen with like wicked production. This stage is amazing. I've never seen something like so collapsible and accessible and easy to deal with. I was like, this is wicked. So where am I? Let's try not to get everyone's license plates in there. But yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but we got like blue skies out there.
You can see it. Well, a little bit in the corner. Yeah, it's like that here too. I was very, very happy.
Yeah. And then, so just like making a reason to go outside. I'm like, oh, I need to go outside.
It's way nicer.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. So we got like all blue skies and
this is a camping area there?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm like 4 feet away from it. I might as well just keep walking. And then we have in the back, there's like a whole parking lot where all the food trucks are going to be set up. I don't know if you can see, but Beach Eats is already ready to go. And then here's the beginning of the campsite, and that's where everyone
Okay. Where is this?
It's in Millet, Alberta.
Oh wow, okay. Millet.
Yeah, little town of Millet. It's crazy small. It's central Alberta, so like you get off the what is it? Get out of Leduc area. So when you fly into Edmonton, it's like maybe 15 minutes away from the Edmonton airport.
Oh, got you. Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. What the heck have you been up to?
Oh man, I've been just working. I did a lot of we have a lot of people graduating from my school. It's like a small school, so kind of been focusing a lot on that and making sure that they're getting everything that they need, and applying for grants for them and loans and all kinds of things, and getting people into college. So I haven't really even had a chance to do a whole lot, but it feels good because I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. But
Wow.
I'm also on the music end. I have been working with someone, trying to manage the business and putting together a plan for release, because there's all these songs that are just ready to go that just need to be put out. So I'm creating a strategy. It's making me feel a lot better because it was just me and a bunch of songs, and I couldn't really no one really gave enough of a shit to help me do anything with it, and until now, so I feel really good about it.
Crazy. So you're talking about the same kind of
Like the sec-
catalog of music that you've been working on for a while.
yeah, the second album basically, and then there's like songs beyond that. But it's really good to have a person that you can sit with and kind of work those things out and figure out a likely strategy based on what you can afford, and then see what kind of grants you can get. Um, because we deserve to have our music treated properly. It doesn't. You can't like demand that people like it, but I'd like to get it done in the right way, so it gets the best chance to be appreciated by people, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, look at my
Um,
lips, it's so green.
so you're feeling confident with the team that you have this year?
Just yeah, starting out, but me and the person I'm working with directly, and then trying to put together a team, which is kind of exciting. But
Very
basically, yeah, I mean, it's. I just feel like finally it's like these songs are going to come out, because what happens to me is if I have a bunch of songs I'm sitting on, um, as far as I can make more music, but as far as writing more songs, I kind of get blocked. Like if I have a bunch of stuff that hasn't come out yet, I just feel like, okay, I just need to get those out. It's almost like my head's full or something.
right. So you almost want to like
Yeah,
detox the last little bit and then like start afresh.
yeah. So it's good that we have a plan now, and so I think throughout the summer there'll be songs coming out. So I think maybe July and then late August, and yeah. But I'll let you know for sure. But it's
Yeah.
really good. So that's been helping my mental health for sure. Just having a plan and not just kind of floating around trying to make more music and not put out other music, right?
Yeah, that's definitely a stressful thing to deal with. I've been stuck in I have a million things to do and no like a million things to do and then not accomplishing all like one at a time. So I've
Yeah,
had like that like wide open headspace where I'm like, oh, I'm not really task managing properly.
yeah. I've kind of been there too. I find also when it's in the school year, I get into a certain kind of mode, and I don't know. By the time it gets to this point, I'm just trying to get through it. So I almost like I don't feel as creative because I'm just trying to get to the point where I'm in the summer and I have all the time to myself to do everything. But
Right.
that's been kind of a funny. Just working in the school district is something you get used to because you get so much time off in the summer, and your life starts kind of gravitating around that, right? Because it's the only time you actually have time to yourself to like focus on what you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, but like not everybody has that privilege of having like the
It's
whole
incredible.
summer, right?
Yeah.
Like
Well,
what
I
a
haven't. I haven't. I've only been there for 3 years, so it's been. I'm just getting used to it. But it blew me away when the first year I worked, and then the summer was off. I was like, this is my first summer off since high school. Like, right? Because like when you get into the working world, when do you ever have like 2 months off? Never. Like unless you have seasonal work, which I didn't.
right, but even then it comes with like you gotta find something like I used to work at Mount Washington in the
Mm.
winter and then Oak Bay Marine Group in the summer. But it's like
Oh yeah.
there's like a lot of like moving pieces to like get on EI for the
Totally.
kind of like the fall and the springtime, and then you got to like, you know, reapply and stuff. So there, I don't know if there's really any other career that kind of allows like, you know, and in prime time too, like in the middle of summer, like who,
I know, right?
yeah,
Definitely not the service industry.
no,
Touring was crazy like that, but it would be, you'd be off at weird times, like, you know, summer you're always touring, and then around
yeah,
Christmas or something, but then there'd be times where it's just nothing. It's funny, I was talking to some of my students about that, like how when you grow up, like when the choice that I first made right out of high school was something that didn't have a lot of order or guarantees or anything. So I've kind of been in this like semi-entrepreneurial situation my whole life, even though sometimes I would work to make money, but it was really like, we're trying to do this, and the work that you do when you with performing music, it's kind of, you never know when you're going to work, like you just don't know. Like there was times where we had quite a regular tour schedule, but a lot of times where it was just, you're like on call the entire time, you know,
yeah,
and it's hard to commit to a different line of work or to commit to like studying, because you know you may get called to do like a big tour, and you know you want to be available or whatever, you know, because that's the dream.
that is
um yeah, it's interesting, but I think now people going into it can set themselves up better with a better plan, and I think it would be good. But people used to tell me to have like a backup plan, and I'd be like, nah, you know, like I'm going to do this, and now that I look back, I'm like, you know, it kind of would have been cool to have something that's adjacent to the music industry that also actually made like guaranteed money, you know?
yeah. My grandpa always said that. He's like, if you're gonna do music, which I never obviously did, but he was like, if you're gonna do music, you should go into like management or like lighting or sound or something. So that way,
Hmm.
like, you know, when you don't have work necessarily, like at least you'll still have work. And I think IATSE, IATSE Union is kind of like a great space when you're an artist to kind of look to see what like who's working where and why, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah,
always they were always like a good point place for me to like see what was going on. But yeah. Can we get back to like what you've been doing with the school stuff though? Like, so when
yeah.
you're looking at like grant writing and like helping people get set up for success, like is that just like that is your job, or is that like
Um,
people that are coming kind of after hours and stuff?
it's a bit of both. Like I'm an EA this year, so I'm mainly an academic aide.
Right.
Like I help people get through the schoolwork, but then, you know, like at our school, because it's a small and very interconnected sort of alternate school, everyone takes on more or different kind of roles. So I did assist one student this year in applying for a bunch of stuff, and then get into housing for VIU, and you know, things like that. It's just kind of it's cool to be able to do it. It's not necessarily, I don't think, directly in my job description, but working in an alternate school team, you kind of just do a lot of things that, you know, you learn things that you didn't expect to learn, which is cool. Like, you
Yeah.
know, so now if when my kid who's 16 now wants to start doing it, I'll know how to do it, you know?
Yeah, totally. Well, that's
Because
really awesome.
yeah, because I've been in, I feel like a lot of people, and I think especially neuro spicy or neuro delicious people, we're like scared of paperwork or like how to fill things out, and we like objectify it in the most negative way, and like we'll push it away and not do it, and like to our very detriment. And so I know I've definitely done that with the idea of filling things out and doing it right and all those kind of things. It's like same as like being scared of taking tests or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's good to have people in your life that aren't scared of that and do understand that process, and aren't intimidated by like maybe fucking up or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So it's funny to finally be that person for someone else, because I've always wanted that when I was younger, is to someone that understands systems and how to do those things in the right way to get what you need or whatever. I didn't really have much of that, so it's kind of cool to kind of be in that role now, and still learning, but just be able to provide that sort of like, okay, someone's looking out for me. It's not just me looking at the screen trying to figure out where things go and what I'm supposed to click on, and you know.
Well, it's very frustrating. Like I mean, um, the amount of opportunities people miss out on just because of the bureaucracy that comes with it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
nothing is nothing comes without paper pushing. And I've talked about this a lot, especially when it comes to like people that are dealing with coming out of like institutions and things like that. Like trying to get back into society. And I'm like, they really don't make it easy for anybody. But it's certainly like the fact that we're like aware that people are correct me if I'm wrong, neurodivergent, spicy and exciting, right? But if we're acknowledging that that's a thing, and then we're still putting the same standards on the situation, right? Like, I'm not really sure how we feel like people can get any sort of movement in those places. Like, we're acknowledging that it's a thing, and then we're like, well, we're just going to leave the paper pushing in its place. Like, how is anyone supposed to get anything done? So
I mean, for a lot of people like that fall into that category, we'd be better off just going and actually speaking to a person, right? Like, because we, actually it depends, because there's such a variety, even such a spectrum in the kind of neurodivergent, like kind of, what do you say, like arena, because it's like some people are really good at like doing things properly, they're almost obsessive about it, and some of us can't, like, we look at it and it looks like a different language, right? So I think but yeah, it needs to be figured out, and I think that I was surprised. Like, my mom has gone through pretty serious mental health stuff, and I remember when there were a lot of times that her behavior was such that if I hadn't been able to intercede for her, like, she would have definitely come up against like insurmountable barriers, like would have probably been on the street, and that's not like me being like I'm a hero. It's like, no, I just simply was able to talk to someone. It's not even like that I was doing a great job. Like, it's just that when you're in a certain mental state, sometimes you present in such a way that someone can't even deal with you, or will kick you out before they can even hear you out, so a lot of times I would just be there just going, oh, what happened? And they'll be like, well, she came at me like this, and I'm not going to help her if she's talking to me like that. And I was like, oh, she's just trying to get her check. And so they're like, okay. And then you just walk them through it, like it's things like that. And that's the most basic thing you would do for someone you love or you don't love. But it's like, just one of this made me think, it's like, if she didn't have me, or if, the people that don't have someone like that cares enough to like do it the millionth time or whatever, they're going to come up against these barriers and not get the services that they need. And some of them might, really, really have a hard time with that. So I thought about that a lot, and I think that's what kind of pushed me into like becoming a helper, like joining a helping profession, because I'm like, hey man, like if I can do it, and so many times, even interceding for other people, it was often a very simple, calm conversation that would fix a situation that had ramped up to such a degree that it was like someone's ready to call the cops or whatever, like. That made me think, I'm like, having a calm center and being able to access that for other people is quite a service that you can give to the world. So it's one of those things that if you can, then you kind of have to. That's like a duty,
Yeah, you're like your service, or like as if we are like a servant to others. And it's crazy because people go their whole lives not knowing that that's even a thing. But yeah, if you've experienced that in your personal life, I could see why you would want to like seek and also like advocate for people. A lot of the times when people see those things happening in the community, they don't understand that it's just a misunderstanding, right?
Yeah.
So it can be really stressful for somebody who's like, people are both speaking English but not talking the same language. Like that can escalate quickly. Yeah.
And it's also about observing. Like when I go there as an interceder, usually you have to wait for a while before you can even talk to someone. You can see how people are being treated. Like you can see how the person behind that desk often gets spat on, yelled at, like treated like they're the problem because the person didn't have their shit together to get their money or whatever, who knows, but in like 15 to 20 minutes, you often be like, wow, I would hate to work here. You know what I mean? Like I definitely often would feel that, like the way people talk to you, the way they jump at the thing, the reason there's a, the glass there and all this. And it's like, man, like, I can see how, like, if my mom's, whoever is the 17th person that day that's going to come at you sideways or a certain like aggressive way, you're going to be like, no, I've had enough. Like, I'm not helping anyone. I'm going to close this desk down, and then you guys have to wait longer, And I can't even blame the person for doing that, because that's also protecting themselves, because they got to come in there every day dealing with that shit, right? So.
Totally. And also they're also following like, policy and procedure too, right? Like just because you're there doesn't mean that they don't have to take a 15-minute break, or just because there's 6 of them doesn't mean that they're all available at that time. Like I think people forget yeah, what it looks like from like an employment standard. I know when people call to like do a survey and they're like, sorry to bother you. I'm like, oh, I'm sure you probably just get crapped on all day long.
Yeah.
Like, no, thank you for calling, you know, because no one wants to do that job. Or, I mean, no one, grows up being like, this is what I want to do with my life. Like people do
No.
that because, maybe it pays the bills or it landed in their lap or whatever. And like, yeah, there's no reason for anyone to be excited on either end of that situation for sure.
Yeah,
But
and I think that kind of leads you also maybe leads us to like there's such a need for mental health um in the industry, like, well, I don't even call it the industry, but in the public service sector,
yeah,
because people are under so much pressure that by the time they get to that desk, they're going to have a hard time often talking about things, very calmly and respecting the rules, because things are going really badly for a lot of people and society doesn't seem to have any solution. So when they show up, they're going to be mad and they're going to be not at their best and they're going to be desperate and angry.
hmm
So that's something we all have to look forward to if you're working in the public sector for the future, because I just saw, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but there's this RCMP report that came out, and one of their biggest threats to Canadian security, to them, this was last year, I think late last year or early this year, was that when Canadians figure out that they'll never own any property, like when enough people finally go, oh my God, we've been fully duped, and they're trying to get us to work till we're 70 now, like, and we don't get to buy anything. And they're really worried that what happens when we get pissed off enough to be like, yo, what happened?
be a
Let's
revolt.
see the receipts. Like, how did this happen? How did And so that's literally one of their security risks for the Canadian, what is it, the risk assessment or whatever.
But it should be like the fact that people aren't angry blows my mind. Like, how are people not angry? Actually, it's Narcotic Wasteland. They're headlining this show actually in Dallas. I had chatted with him last week and he was going on about like the fact that no one's angry about like the food supply and no one's angry about like mortgages and no one's angry about
Yeah.
retirement and things like that. And it's like and it's true. Like, why we find a million things to complain about in a day as a society.
Yeah.
We're trying to navigate all of these initiatives and awareness, platforms and all of this stuff. But like the reality is that like no one's really kicking up their feet about the fact that we're never going to be comfortable. Like, there is no end game here.
I feel like maybe it's like people feel defeated when you think about it, because it used to be conspiracy theories, and now there's literally like corporate eggheads at the WEF saying what they want to do. And
Yeah.
so then people are finally having this huge, even if you're completely out to lunch, you will have seen those things. And it's like, those are actual like business leaders that are sitting there trying to plan how they're going to keep us like ants in a colony. And so I think a part of us is just like, yo, I give up. Like, all I can do is just go get that money, feed my family, whatever. And like at most, maybe try to protect your liberty, in the worst case scenario or something. But people don't feel like they can change, the order of the time, because there's these people. I feel like part of it is when you think about it, like, okay, so you're working all the time. You got a single hustle. You're trying to feed one family, trying to feed one, group of people. These guys are having meetings 24/7 about all kinds of shit like this, nefarious deeds that they're trying to do. We're so unorganized. We've been forced to fend for self, and we don't get together to talk about it. Those guys are always getting together, trying to figure out how to fuck us over. It's like, that's the given.
Right.
They're highly organized, right? Highly organized, and there's money in those meetings. There's like people getting paid to be there and do all that stuff. And so I think when you think about that, it makes you feel defeated or really, really intimidated. It's like, well, what do we do? How do we do anything when those guys seem to have it all figured out? And they seem to have like bent the rules so much that we didn't even realize how much they bent the rules. Like,
But okay, but that's the thing. Like, you're right. When they started bending them, they controlled they controlled the conversation to the point where we really believe that the only way that those things could be happening is if they were conspiracy.
totally.
Like, there's no way that would even happen. Like, you know what I mean? I can't think of any off the top of my head, but like jet streams. I mean,
Totally.
that's one of the easiest ones, right? And then we were all caught on the jet streams, and we come to find out, like, they're making whole clouds.
Yeah.
Like, the jet streams weren't even the problem. Like,
And
we were caught up in that being a
there's
conspiracy, but
measurable,
they're
yeah.
generating weather. Like, never
But
mind that.
yeah, and the side effect is there's a measurable chemical load on the land now that you can actually measure finally, because there's been so many layers of it that you
Yeah,
can actually find strontium and nano aluminum, and that shit is there way more than it should be, like
yeah,
way, way, way more. And there's no natural way that could even be, right? So, and that's
no,
like, I was just talking to my kid about it the other day. I'm like, and so that's created like a tinderbox on the ground, on the forest floor, that's highly, nanometals of any kind are highly flammable. And
yeah,
so then, especially those ones, and especially in already dry ground that gets drier because of the metals that are in it now. Like it's a really crazy situation. And then they turn around and it's like, oh, there's a forest fire every year now. You come to expect it. It's a
yeah.
new normal, right?
We don't know why. Yeah,
Oops. Meanwhile, indigenous people all over the world had controlled fires, had all kinds of things that they did to not let that happen. It's quite the opposite, right?
yeah.
Um, and so I don't know. I feel like at some point I don't know if we're all kind of just waiting for that tipping point where we're like, we don't believe you guys anymore. Like they can still say whatever they want, but if the majority of people go, I don't know, I don't believe that, then
But
things
the
will change.
majority, but that's the thing, is that the majority is saying that. Like, whether
I
you're a
wonder
conspiracy
though.
theorist, or you're an old country bumpkin, or you're downtown city, like, we're all having the same conversations. That's what's
Mm,
bizarre, is that,
mhm.
like, no one believes it. The issue is that no one, those demographics aren't coming together to agree with each other,
This is the
right?
part.
They're like, well, I only believe this part, or I don't believe
Yeah,
this
yeah,
other
yeah,
part, or like, this
yeah.
is what applies to me, or this what applies to
Sure.
me, or this doesn't. And like, we're not organized enough to like be like, okay, well, you guys out in the country and you downtown in the city are actually having the same conversation,
Yeah, and we have the same needs, right?
right?
And
Yeah.
we're being threatened by the same forces.
Yeah, exactly. It's wild. But like, it's wag the dog, right? Like, it's like, one hand, like, if whenever there's something crazy happening in the news, that's exactly when like something else kind of like rears its ugly head. And that's why when, like I mentioned, the jet streams, I'm like, well, we were all concerned about the jet streams and like what was happening there, but come to find out, the jet streams weren't even really the harshest thing that was happening at that time. Like, they were up in Alaska, like generating clouds and weather that
Hmm.
were like taking out the west coast,
Yeah.
right? And the east coast, like, they were taking out massive like chunks of land across Canada. And we're like, oh, why are these jet streams happening? Like, yeah, that was a negative thing, but it was like, wag the dog. They're like, check this out while we do this
Yeah,
over
yeah.
here, right?
Totally. And there's just so much of that it's hard to stay on top of it and actually understand what's happening, right? So I don't
Yeah,
blame anyone for kind of either being confused or looking at it like I just can't figure this out. Like even with this Israel Gaza thing right now, the Palestine thing.
yeah,
The main emotion that was conveyed to me by a lot of well-meaning people is that they're just confused about the situation, that they don't understand it. And
yeah,
then the onus is on you as the context holder to be like, oh, well, how far back do you want to go? But like, I also wasn't really doing that this time around as much. I found myself kind of going, okay, I'm also trying to process this latest genocide. I'm not here now to also explain it to all of you guys. You know what I mean? Not that I'm
yeah,
supposed to be the one that knows, but I do know. It's kind of how I grew up, right? But um, and so that's just one example, is what I'm saying is people are like, they kind of give up easily when things look like it's going to be, if I uncover more stuff, I'm going to be uncomfortable, or like, oh, I'm going to get into this conspiracy theory stuff, because a lot of people now feel like, any alternative information is actually like untrustable completely, which is interesting because the actual news itself has proven itself to be so untrustable. But
yeah.
somehow there's that air of legitimacy. They're still hanging on to it, you know. Um, but yeah, it's not going to last very long.
But
Hold on
why?
one sec.
Okay. Is it streaming?
There we go.
Mm.
I was getting a phone call from someone about a show, and I he called a bunch, so I didn't want to be like, turn you off too much. But, mhm.
No, you were able to. That's so funny because I've heard so many like horror stories are like, oh, if you get a phone call, it like wrecks everything, blah blah blah. But you got a phone call while we were doing this.
Yeah, I turned it off twice, and then I felt
Wow.
bad, and I texted him. I'll hit him back later. But yeah,
Yeah.
I was actually scared when it showed up that it was gonna just like zap out, but it didn't.
Yeah, I've heard other people that use the same product and they're like, make sure that you like turn everything off. And I'm like, I've never turned anything off and I've never really had a problem, but yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never
So-
want to miss on an opportunity for sure.
I think one thing that we can, I noticed actually since Obama came in, but especially since Trump came, it was like I had just never seen so much division. Like, like of course people are always at each other. That's been a thing, but like I've never especially when Trump came in, I'd never quite seen all of the media act one way all of a sudden. Like with Obama it kind of started, but then it was like, I don't know. I was like, holy shit, they're all saying exactly the same thing. That shit freaked me out a little bit, but that made me realize it's like when they do stuff like that, it's because they're scared that there's shit happening that is kind of getting out of control. Like there's either too much information or people have too little information or creating ideas that are dangerous or whatever. And so then it's like, wow, like they can do that, and that make you realize, because I grew up knowing that the media is somewhat coordinated, obviously, because they, but I just never quite seen it quite like that, where like literally everyone was doing the same thing. And so I think into COVID, it was one of those where like, if you had been a truth seeker in the past, now you're dealing with it on a different level, like, and that also is a mental health kind of situation, because it makes you feel crazy. Like, why do I keep looking through? Why do I keep trying to see something that's wrong? Like, why am I so suspicious? Like, and of course I know why. Like, it's not like I don't know why, but
you're suspicious because you're educated enough to understand that it's
oh my God, the facts are the facts, right? So it's not like I'm making anything up. It's like, that's the thing about the whole conspiracy theory thing. It's like, no, not really. Like, yeah, so much of it has come true, and I think that's maybe what we touched on earlier, is that if the mainstream media doesn't show it to some people, they'll still think something is true when it's not, and I don't know what to do about it. I'm not sure I'm going to be shouting stuff from the rooftops or whatever. It's not really my style, but
you know what? The older I get, the less I feel obligated to tell people. Like the older I get, the more I'm like, okay, has it made a difference? Like, has my extremely well thought out, and I'm sure you feel the same way lyrically when you write music, right? Like you're like, okay, I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to use all the oxymorons and the double entendres and the metaphors that I can use, but hopefully get the message across that like what's happening is serious. And then it just always seems to kind of like, that's the end, like people appreciate the art of what you're doing, or people appreciate the poetry as you're speaking, or people, they want to hear what you're saying or whatever, but like nothing really ever comes out of it.
Yeah, like, I know. It feels like that.
In order to organize ourselves in such a way, we would have to get back to like the Underground Railroad, I feel like, with our messages. Like we have to create a way that people would find it like, this must be so important if it's not being delivered the same way all the other messages are being delivered, right? Like,
and it's going to come to that. I just recently was in some discussion on social media, and a friend of mine, I was talking with a friend of mine, but another friend jumped in that I've known a little bit longer, and he was like, hey, like these are really good ideas, but in order to actually make them happen, we have to get off social media. Like we have to actually like meet in person and talk about real stuff and make plans, like, because you can't really be even typing the shit on social media, like we know. And even then it's like you're less likely to take it seriously when you're on there. Like it's better in person. It's like we kind of need to return to like that common sense. Like when you're in each other's presence, more stuff can actually happen. Like, like otherwise we're just talking in circles, which is what we've done ever since the internet, right? So it's like I feel like it's time to get back to the basics and maybe like create on the ground, small groups that can kind of get on the same page. fully,
Mhm.
and then take that as like the core of like a larger group. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to do that stuff online. I feel like it's and I'm not paranoid or anything, but I do see like how much all of these like companies that run the social media, how they control things, how they get into, like they
The
basically spy
algorithm
on
is
everything you do.
wild, man.
It's
Like
incredible.
wild.
Like, yeah. And like, and so weak. It's like when I see that, I'm like, so you guys are playing unfair. To me, that's like a weak person's game. Like, okay, so you're scared of us. That's why you have to trick us all the time. Like,
It's totally crazy. I can post a picture. I posted a picture of me like with my horse the other day or whatever. No big deal. And it like flew around the internet. I post like some serious, like well thought out, organized men's mental health month content. I
yeah,
can hashtag that from here to Tuesday. And no, people are like, dude, I follow you. I didn't even see it. I'm like, what
yeah.
do you mean? How did you not see it? Like it's on my wall. They're like, yeah, it did not come up my newsfeed.
It's
Not like
weird, right?
not like when you change your profile picture. Like that's bizarre. And it's frustrating because like how do you convince people that it's important enough to be word of mouth, right? It's important enough to be word of mouth, but then how do you get the message across? Do we buy postcards again? Like how do
I
we get it
know.
in how do you get it in the ears and the hearts of people? Like do we write it in the newspaper? Right? Do we put out a wanted ad? Like how does this happen? Because you can't go on social media and then be like, we're not going to use social media in order to create this initiative.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Right?
a catch 22, totally. I'm right there with you. I don't know. And also I think that we've gotten kind of bashful about like expressing our opinions to each other and like being open and like having these groups that where it's okay to disagree, and like everything's become pretty polarized. So I think people expect, I don't know. I feel like people aren't as easy to, like when you think about it, like our great grandfather's gender. I mean, it's hard to say because everyone's different and everyone grew up in different places, but like people were way more likely to know their neighbors, to talk to their neighbors, to make a plan as a block group, like and I don't mean like snitching on kids trying to do graffiti. I mean like, yo, we need to maybe, like if the government's not going to do this road for us, we're going to do it ourselves, or we need to fix that bridge
Right.
that we've been asking council for, and they're not doing it. And like they would actually organize and do that shit. Now we're always looking for someone else to do it. We're always going to call someone, and the same thing how like they weaponize police. It's like that's not what the fucking police is for. Like in
No,
the
they're
ideal
supposed to serve
society,
and
I don't
protect.
mean like, of course that's what it's for in the States, but like in the ideal society it's not. But like they use it like that. It's like, oh, instead of going to speak with someone and risking maybe, yeah, getting in an altercation, I'm going to call the cops who are basically like might kill that person because I'm scared to talk to them.
Yeah.
Like that happens so much, right? That happens so much. They would never like characterize it that way themselves, but that's what happens. You're scared to have an interaction with your neighbor, so you're more likely to call authority, which first of all gives your own authority away, which is sad, but then also like
Right.
endangers the other person, right? And because police are trained by terrorists, like the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, trains U.S. police. It's not a secret.
Not a
Like
secret.
so, those
No.
guys are trained to be extremely violent and not take any back talk, and they're not scared of harming people, and they think that their life is more important than the people that they're serving, and that is exactly how they're being treated. So like if you call those people, you really like, you may as well point a gun, with one bullet in it, and just keep clicking, because that's basically the same thing, like.
And
And
that's what's, yeah, you just said so much interesting stuff because all I keep thinking is like, we don't want to assist ourselves with support because we're scared that the support is going to take out our neighbor, man. Like that's the reality that
yeah,
we're living in right now.
that's
And it's
crazy.
that, yeah, that's bizarre. Like we would sacrifice our own security for the safety of somebody that we are trying to be safe from.
Yeah, it's a weird situation. And like, anyone that grew up in any sort of like low income neighborhood, or the so-called hood or whatever, like they don't even come anyway. So like this is the thing that I kept hearing when I was growing up, like especially in the States. They're like, well, I mean, I don't know, like most of the time when you call, they take forever to get here anyway, whether it's an ambulance or a police, that no
Yeah.
one really calls them, even if they want to, because
Yeah.
by the time they get here, the person's dead. You have to drive them to the hospital yourself. And that happened, like especially when I was in LA County, when I was in high school. there was a lot of that kind of like situations. I was like, man, like people are living crazy ways, like, you know. So on top of that, now it's like, yeah, so if you go into the wrong neighborhood and you're in the gated neighborhood walking your dog, but you happen to be black or something, you know, then there's the other side. Like people will call, and then their pit bulls will come get you or whatever. And it's like, that's just like an extreme example, but it's like society is like willingly self-segregated in a lot of ways, and that's kind of to the benefit of the state, because the state wants us to not, they want us compartmentalized and not realizing that we have the same desires and the same needs and the same fears. If we knew that, then be like, oh, but why are you feeling like that? And the answer is up, right? The answer is the people sitting on top of you. And it's not the middle class, it's the other guys, the top class, right? And so that's what they don't want us to know. And so it helps them that we are racist and that we're prejudiced and we're traumatized and all this stuff, because it further compartmentalizes you from society, from action, right? Like we were talking about, how do you make these changes? Like, and part of that is I'm weak, I'm hurt, I have a disability, I have, right? That's a large part of our cultural consciousness in the West. People are not well, right? Like that's a crazy thing. Like how many people do you know that aren't well? Like so many.
So everybody. It's
incredible, right? So then you feel more weak, more vulnerable, you're more desperate, you're more likely to take a deal from the government. You want money from them. I'm not, this is not a fault of anyone. I just mean that's when you're sick, you feel you're not at your best. So you're more likely to go along with the suggestion of someone that has a white coat on. You're more likely to take the suggestion of a doctor or a psychiatrist or a government agent.
The
right?
income assistance and the happy pill and the anti-inflammatory
the
and
quick dopamine, all that stuff.
Yeah,
Right. And
totally.
so whereas when we were pre-contact, and this is not to keep going back, but it's like just to give you an idea, indigenous people throughout the world of all colors and all shapes were a vibrant, healthy people. They were self-sufficient. There was not diseases like we have today. Like, yes, people died of all kinds of things back then too, but the life that they lived was wholesome and full of good things, right? So, and that's also not to romanticize, because there's also lots of bad shit that happened. But what I mean is that the basic physical health and cultural structure was healthy. So that's why they tried so hard to break us down all over the world, like to take our belief system, to take our names, to take the things that give us joy, to not allow us to do those things. Dancing, right? Sharing food, like singing songs together. Those things are now, psychiatrists are going, oh, psychologists are going, these are like, did you know that exercise and dancing is like higher than anything else for mental health? I just found this out, like in like a meta study of many different things. Dancing is number one. Like, and all our ancestors knew that. And so they did that. That was part of our culture, not because it was fun, not only because it was fun, because it's medicine.
Right.
And now we're scared to even be silly enough to dance in front of each other now, right? Like how many people are like, oh, I don't really do this. Like, and if you did, you could shake a lot of shit off, you know? And I'm saying
dancing.
this guy.
I mean, not even dancing, Mo. Like people can't even talk to each other. Like to get to the place to dance, you need to like communicate. Maybe turn a speaker on in a park, or you need to like take a drum with you wherever you go.
Yeah,
or
it's a communal activity. Yeah.
It's a communal activity. Like in Jamaica, we've talked about this before. Like in Jamaica, there's you go out and you can hear the music everywhere. It's everywhere. It's pumping from everybody, and no one is shameful about it. They're like, this is my space. This is our space. Like, come and join what we're doing. And for whatever reason, like you hear stereo when you hear somebody driving by with subs, and people are like, "Ugh, that's so obnoxious. Why they need to turn that down?" Like, do they really though?
Yeah.
Is it really like impeding in your space that much? Like, is it really? Because every time I hear that, I'm like curious to know what they're listening to.
And
like,
then to think too. Yeah, exactly. And to think like how since birth you've been inundated with corporate propaganda over sound waves too. It's the radio, it's the TV, it's the commercials, it's everything. So but why is this guy in his Jeep so annoying to you when the corporations have been in your ear like a worm ever since?
I've never ever understood that.
Right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It makes no sense. Like we're so used to sound in commercials and jingles, right? Like
and things that you don't even care about, but they're in your ear.
Song, like,
yeah. It's because I think they don't like the audacity of the person that's willing to express themselves in that way, right? That's often the case. Like the haters, it's often because they're not audacious enough or confident enough to just not give a shit, you know? So they'll look at you and be like, oh, like I want to cut you down because I realize that I can't aspire to that because I'm too scared. And
Yeah.
it's actually because, you know, hate comes from fear. It's not, that's pretty
Yep.
easy to understand. It's
Yep.
from, it's from your own like inability to do something that often you will hate someone else for being so good at it. Like it's so normal, you
And then you
know?
see them having fun and you're like, okay, well now you have like, not only are you maybe jealous that they had like the audacity to go about it, but now like now you're upset and angry and you're sitting
Yeah.
with that, and they've just gone on their way having fun. Like, so not only do you have to like hear it and see it, but now you have to sit with it for a bit, especially in public places, right?
Yeah.
Or even in your home, because like,
It really grates people. Yeah.
yeah, it drives them crazy. And
Yeah.
I see this every like Super Bowl Sunday or whatever. Everyone gets to go in, right? Everyone is like the only time that it's like publicly okay to like have a party or whatever.
Sure.
But not after the Super Bowl is over. Like,
Yeah.
right? Like 3:30, you better turn that off there, Sally. Like, what is happening, man? Like,
I
why do you need
know.
an excuse or a reason? Like, it's Tuesday, turn the music on.
And I kind of feel like, and this is not, I don't want to grossly generalize, but that's a very like Anglo-Saxon kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
the quiet time and like this enforced sort of sense of order and quiet that this is, it's not even realistic. It's a really colonial kind of idea. And I'm not even sure that, well, I think they do it over there, but I don't think they had to impose it so much, because when they came to the new so-called new world, it was so alien to be that way that they had to force it on people. Whereas I think where they came from, they've kind of been that way for a while. You know what I
That's
mean? That
just the
kind of,
way that it was.
or whatever, maybe. I don't know. They also abuse each other so badly before they came here. So I don't know. It's hard to say, you know, but
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I know in comparison to how most Earth peoples lived before colonization, of course, you'd have to force the shit out of them to not dance while they're working, to not sing while they're working. You know what I mean? It's not because you don't
But
want them
that's,
to
I
speak
mean,
their language.
that was what productivity was, right? Like people,
This
you
is the thing.
created, like, I mean, right down to the chain gang. Like, I mean, that's
Yeah,
how else are you going to convince people that this is exciting stuff and to pay their taxes? Like, you have to
exactly.
turn on something, right? Like, you gotta,
Yeah.
I mean, and the music was kind of the easiest way, but like, God forbid I mean, and everyone wants to hear the Drive at 5, right? Like the radio is cool, but once you get home, it's straight to the TV or the
Mhm.
Dateline or whatever. And now it's on a freaking loop on everyone's thing because
It's
all of
nonstop
those.
now. This is the trouble.
Yeah,
It's not programs that stop. It's just you just keep
no,
going, right?
no, there's like 2-minute intervals between your favorite 6 p.m. sitcom. It's bizarre. And then the other thing that drives me nuts is that like we have all these beautiful children and then we get mad like because they're still in that space where they want to be expressive and they're still kind of
Totally.
tapped into that. But if you just let them get it out, like if you want to be sterile with the sound space, then that's fine. But like, don't push that on your children.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
then don't have kids if you want to be sterile. You know,
but it's
it's
crazy.
crazy.
Like, how many people are like, "Oh, be quiet," or "Turn that down," or what? You know what I mean? I'm like, "No, man, turn it up." Because the thing is that if you just let them shake off that and get back to their own like healthy mental health space through dance and music, like you were saying, like let the kids shake it off a bit. They know what they're doing, right?
I
Then they
I
just
believe
chill
that
out
for
anyways.
sure.
Like the kids can only
And
listen
and
to it
some
for
kids
so
will literally
long.
tell you that, you know, my 10-year-old will literally be like, Dad, I just need to like get my energy out before bed. Otherwise I'm going to be squirming and I'm going to be
Yeah.
up till 10:30 anyway. So and he
Anyways,
knows that because he knows himself. And I'm like,
yeah.
you're right. Let's just do that.
Gonna turn into a whole thing. Like, let's just like, preventative music playing. Like, that's a thing. That's definitely a thing in my house. Anyways, I
Oh
don't.
yeah.
Whatever needs to happen, however you need to get there.
Or
Like,
even
that's
go
fine.
rip around the house or go for a quick bike ride around the block. I don't care what time it is. Like if that's what does it, then let's do that. You know, I don't.
Yeah,
I feel
exactly.
like that's like, you know, our generation of parenting so different than even we were raised. I think like it's very. I think it's still experimental in its own way because I feel like we're kind of going out on a limb in a lot of ways. Like we're trying something based on what we experienced. You know, like trying to not do a lot of those things,
Yeah,
which you
yeah,
know a lot of parents couldn't do before. You know, so I think we're the generation that's supposed to do that to have the wherewithal to be like, okay, I remember all those times when I was made to feel like that. Why would I ever, you know, or catch yourself when you're being that way? Like, oh,
yeah.
like I felt that vibe. I remember that. I remember when I felt like that, and be like, dude, don't you be the cause of that? That's crazy.
Don't.
Like,
Yeah.
you know,
How dare you? Like, I
yeah,
can't. Oh, the thought of making my child feel like that is like, and not like, shout out to my parents. They're awesome. That's not it. I mean, my dad's a musician, so I'm pretty spoiled
yeah,
with like the, sound therapy for sure. My mom always let me dance on the coffee table, so I can't go, too much into
I
it.
was pretty lucky too, to be honest. But there's, other adults too, and a lot of times it's like people in authority, like teachers and other people that kind of do damage without even knowing that they're doing it
So
because
that's
just the
exactly where
way,
my mind was. I'm like, how many times like I had like one headphone in because that's the way that I like studied or learnt. And the
Mm,
teacher's like, don't do that. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not, I like maybe I find like the way this classroom is set up overwhelming. And that's the only thing grounding me to this desk right now.
totally.
I'm like, yeah, there was lots of times where that was kind of stripped away, right? But again, it's the institutions. It's not the same
Yeah,
way that we're like, predominantly like an Anglo-Saxon style household now. It's the same way that we are conforming to these institutions that have essentially just taken away like the natural therapy of it. Honestly, the fact that study went out, it gives me some hope because again, and I've said this a million times now, I've been doing this podcast, twice a week well, I mean, you were one of my first guests actually, right? Like you and
thanks.
Cyril were one
Yeah,
of my first guests. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was like, I know music and mental health go together. I know because it's what makes me feel good. And since then,
exactly.
we've had like 30 people on the show, all for different reasons, and everyone has brought like sound frequency or breathing exercises or
Mm,
we had someone on the show who like records uh I don't want to say extraterrestrial sounds, but in essential, I mean, it kind of is. They like go out
okay,
and just like, yeah, but they're like getting sounds from NASA and then applying that to sounds from Earth and then using that as a way as therapy and like just to see
that's
that
cool.
people aren't letting go. They're like, no, 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 no. Like, because when I started it, I was like, I'm just going to talk to musicians. And then, then all of a sudden these healers kind of popped out of nowhere. I mean, musicians are healers anyways, but
I know what you
um,
mean.
yeah, but it's been really neat to kind of like see how wide the conversation is because it's a big one, but I don't know. I always thought I thought we were all having the same conversation until someone was like, "What are you doing putting mental health and music together?" So I feel
That's
good that
silly. I don't know why they would say that. I mean, everyone, for sure, people that are neurodivergent, a lot of them can't even do anything without music. That's one thing I've noticed. They can't even physically move. Like some people are
right.
like, I would do all this, but I need a song. Like I need at least one song. I can't. Like, and I was like, I've been like this too. I didn't realize that it's like a thing, but like it's hard to like do housework. It's hard to wash the dishes if you're just doing it in the silence. Like I'm like, I need some music to like move to while I'm doing it. I don't know. It's kind of stimming too, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Well, and it also creates like that. I love it for like the timeline. Like, okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
in my home, like where I live right now, there is like a siren that goes off at 12 o'clock. And I kind of like base my day around like what I can accomplish before that goes off. And so the same way I kind of use music, like how many, because who wants to do dishes, but like how many dishes can I do before this song ends? Or
Totally.
like how many rooms can I get swept before this album's over or whatever? Like, I mean, even just for it in like a space and time has a place, never mind like the actual
That's
um
interesting, actually, that you say that because it is like, didn't someone say that it's like architecture is like freezing space or something, and music is like not, I don't know if it's freezing, but something like um anyway, music is basically time, right? It's like it's kind of like a sequential. It's kind of a trip actually when you think about it, because it kind of goes right back to the beginning, like, and I don't mean like God said something, but like there it was obviously a first sound or vibration that started everything, and I mean that's music. I think that's the beginning of all music, and I think the heart has to do with that. Like it's very similar, you know. So we all have music anyway. I just noticed that some of us like like I stim a lot, so to me, I'm always everyone sees me moving around a lot, like as if there's music playing, even though there isn't, but because there is. Um,
same.
right, and it's like I don't even know what the music is, but that's maybe that's why it's so easy to make music for me because I'm like it's already there. Like I'm just kind of tapping. It's almost like you're tapping in more often once you know how to do it or something. It's like when learning how to fly in your dream or something kind of thing.
Yeah, I have a friend who was like, I don't have to watch a movie to know what's happening in the movie. And at first I was like, that's really weird. What do you mean? And they're like, well, if I can hear the audio, then I know what the visual looks like because I've already seen it once. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they're like, but if you if you take the audio and the visual out, like you just create that in your, I mean, that's imagination. I'm like, okay, yeah, for sure. Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. But I mean, you don't really need somebody else's structure to be able to create that. Like we have all the things that we need in order to create the music. It doesn't have to necessarily be like the
Yeah.
elevator, right? Like it's happening
Oh,
all the
totally.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of it. Being creative is about tapping into the creative force, which is impersonal. It's not male or female. It's not, it is just like an energy that we all have access to. It's just a matter of like feeling like you have the right to access it, almost like. Um, for me, I don't really have a choice, but for some people, I think they get like stopped from doing it.
Yeah.
And like if you're naturally able to tap into that creative sort of, like I call it the ether or whatever, but it's like the realm of ideas.
Mhm.
Once you're in there long enough, like things will come to you that then you'll feel like, oh, I have to do something with this idea. Like I'm sure you've gone through that, even coming up
Yeah.
with this podcast, probably like you get these downloads and you're like, oh shit, now that I know that, I can't unknow
I
that.
kind of know it.
And now I got
So
to act on it, whether it's to make a song or it's to create a podcast or write a story. Like actually the other day I had my first idea for a story again in a long time, and I was like, man, I could really write like a full scene right now, and I didn't. But like being in that mindset and being like, that's anyone's idea, it's not my idea, it's there somewhere, and if I choose to focus on it and shine my light on it, it can be developed into something. And
right.
even then I can choose how much I do, because the idea is going to have its own life. If I try too much to control it, then I'm fucking with the magic. And if I
Yeah.
don't care enough, then it will never happen. But like the idea isn't actually your own. I don't know. It's hard to say because
No,
sometimes it comes and it feels like it is, but I believe that storehouse of all human thought is just above our mind. And so if you're tapping into that, it could literally be someone else's thought. I really believe that.
So I always thought like we had antennas. I'm like, does everyone just
Yeah,
have antennas? Because people
totally.
that like, especially screenwriters are wild. Like that's wild to me. Like a song is one thing because there's,
Yeah,
how many layers of different music. So you need to understand the instrumental and all of that.
sure.
But to be able to create characters
Mm-hmm.
and plot and like some people create language and like I'm
Totally.
like,
It's
who,
amazing.
like why, like how big is their antenna? Like their antenna is huge. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like how are they, like how do I need to hold my hands to catch what they're catching? Like, I always thought that was so interesting. I'm like, what are they
Yeah.
doing?
That's a good point, actually, because some people seem to be able to hone in on that. And
Mhm.
of course, there are ways to like try to do that, right? Like you can train yourself to be more psychic or to be more open to connection like that. And the hard part for I think most of us that are in the know is there's so many methods. Which one is the right one for me, right?
Yeah.
So I think maybe some people that get into like screenwriting, maybe there's like these, because there's like those like kind of like almost spiritual manuals for every line of work, like I bet there's something like that, like a 48 laws of power or something, or
Oh
like
yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. You
Zen
got to
and the art
breathe
of
in and out four
screenwriting or
times,
something,
and yeah,
is a way to
totally.
tap in and to feel like you're relinquish the idea, that it's yours.
That's
That
yours.
forget about that. And then of course this is the mind fuck of Hollywood, is that you have to relinquish that the idea belongs to you to allow it to flourish and to become what it is, but then you have to claim it and get money for it,
In the
right? And
end, yeah.
so
No, but
it's
yep.
kind of like a weird, trippy, like almost like oxymoronic thing. It doesn't really,
Yeah.
because you're doing one thing and then you're going, actually no, it's mine. And we do that as musicians too. We write, okay, but 43% of the song was written by me, because you're doing that, but it's like, I know good and damn well, like when I'm in the zone, that's not me, right?
Right.
It's coming directly through the pen. And so then
From
it's like, who's going to take credit for that? And then it's like, well, you should, because you're the instrument, you're the channel, but in reality, like and that's why I often tell fans or people that ask, it's like, I can't actually claim any of these songs as mine. Of course, they came out through me, so that my name's attached to them. But to actually say you own them is kind of disrespectful to the idea, to
right.
the song. And I learned that from our indigenous elders as well, because I've been blessed to work with quite a few of them, and that's often the thing that not often, but like quite, yeah, a few times there's been a conversation around that, where it's like, like because I think for a lot of people that grew up in the culture, which, you know, they understand that already. So for them to explain it to me, for instance, is like kind of extraneous, but I'm lucky that they did. But it's the idea that, you know, like you can't just sing the song, right? So like certain cultures are very specific about who gets to sing the song, who owns the song. You know, there's lineages and all that, you know, and then other cultures are quite different than that. Like, and they're very much about sharing songs, and they don't care who owns it and who sings it. Anyone that learns it can sing it. And so there's you know, and so I find that really like interesting. I've heard both sides of that, you know, like Caribbean elders. Like I knew one of my friends was a calypso bass player, and he's like in his 70s, and we used to work together, and he used to tell me, he's like, honestly, like he told me what I just said. It's like it's up there and you tap in, and that bass line that I just came up with, it's probably been played by someone else, but here's a new context for it, and I'm going to put my little swing on it. But I'm not going to say it's my bass line. It's just the song wanted that, and that's what happened, you know. And then you hear from someone else from a different culture, and it's quite opposite, where it's like, no, you can't even sing that song. Yes, you learned the words, but you shouldn't. It's not your song to sing, you know. And I'm like, wow, that's so trippy. It's such a different way of looking at the same thing, you know. And I understand maybe both ways and why they do it, you know. So
Yeah,
maybe, yeah,
I can understand that. But sometimes I feel that being a bit disrespectful though, and kind of pushing some of those cultural things is what perpetuates the information. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, like it was kind of back into like culture appropriation and stuff. And I know that
mm-hmm.
that's like a hefty topic, and that's fine.
Sure,
But I feel like sometimes like we need people to maybe try and fail, and then that's what allows the elders to step in and be like, no, no, no,
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
maybe that conversation would never happen otherwise, right? Which
totally,
it just lives and dies with them.
yeah,
So we kind of need the kids to butcher things a little bit, right? To create
totally. Just
that
try,
dialogue
yeah.
between, yeah. And then also like culture to culture, like sometimes, you know, I won't say nothing unless I'm like who doesn't respond to like like a pearl clutching moment, right? Like, I mean, that's when you
Yeah,
get people to talk, and people are like,
yeah, yeah.
I can't believe that they would even think to do that. Because other than that, like the conversation just kind of lives and dies with whoever, you know, began or ended it. Like
It's
that's it.
true. It's true.
Like,
And here's another thing that complicates it is that in the new so-called new world, a lot of our elders are traumatized,
right,
right? And so the culture in some of our regions and some areas has been sort of there's been a disconnect by force. So then there's this like sense of defensiveness about the culture that may have not even been there before. But it's
right,
very much like even when young people try to do it, they're like, that's not the right way. And it's like a little bit too much. And I've heard a lot of young people be like, man, I'm just trying. And here's these older people that should be scaffolding and helping me. They sound like they're cutting me down. They're going, this, I can't believe the youth of today. They don't even know how to say. It's like instead of being like, this is how you say it. Like that's what culture
yeah,
is. We don't jab each other. Well, I mean, I'm not going to say that, but like people do. But like ideally
literally, yeah,
not, especially in this like sensitive climate, because
right,
like everyone's somewhat traumatized. Like the kids that are bridging the gap of their intergenerational trauma to go back to put themselves in a vulnerable spot to say things and try to pronounce it and do all these things. It's difficult. Some of our language, some of the indigenous languages are especially in North America, are like some like Cree is one of the most difficult languages in the world to learn. Like it's
yeah,
to pronounce, to fluently speak, like, and it's incredible. Like you know, and so it's like, of course you're gonna do it weirdly at first. Like it's not even like, of course, you know. And so, but at that vulnerable junction is when elders and older people are supposed to be like
exactly.
helpful and somewhat gentle and respectful to you to push you forward instead of like burning you out where you're like, oh, I don't even want to do
I
this.
don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so I'm not, and again, that's not blaming them because they're also traumatized and they're very defensive about certain things and they don't
right.
even know why it's happening sometimes, you know. So I'm just watching, I'm always observing. So I see that and I'm like, man, I'm completely like, I'm one of those people that is like so displaced. Like I'm literally 10,000 kilometers away from home, but also even when I was there, my culture has been it's a long story, but so for me, I don't even have access to elders. I don't have access to people that actually have anything to do with the actual culture of my ancestors, because it was so badly colonized, you know what I mean, for so long.
Right.
So
Right.
so to me, I'm like, oh, that train is well past. Like,
Long
it's
gone.
really hard to find any sort of practices that are pre-Islamic, and well, that's not entirely true, but it's kind of hard. There's no living, for me at least on the tribal side. There's not a lot of living practitioners of like the shamanic kind of arts that we are all had before, and so it's kind of like when I came here and I was like, oh my god, yes, the bad stuff that happened is more recent, but at least we still have a gap, like we still have a bridge. Like, there are still
Mm.
living people that grew up speaking the language. There's, you know what I mean, like there's still living people that remember potlatch, that remember how to do certain things, that have like,
Right.
it's so important and incredible. And like a lot of people in the world don't have that because that happened to them earlier, and white people are some of those people, right? So they've been colonized many thousand, like 2,000-3,000 years ago, by Rome, by Greece, you know, and so
I wonder how they feel about it. Like, I've never really talked to, because it's so interesting. Like, when we're like white people, like, and people can say whatever they want. I don't really care. Like, I grew
yeah,
up in a white household and a black household, so I'm gonna go ahead and just say whatever they have to say. But
yeah,
I wonder how they feel about like their lack of culture, because I always hear them say like, "Well, I'm Scottish, or I'm Irish, or
yeah,
I'm this, or I'm that," even though that they don't, like, they really have no business identifying with any of that. Like,
yeah.
for 3 generations, they've just been Canadian. Like, how come that's
It's that
like,
new hybrid culture that's not really a actual culture, right? Like,
it's weird. They like don't
yeah,
want to claim Canada as a culture, so they claim like
yeah, but they're
three,
not
four
practicing those
generations
ways, and
ago,
they don't often
but they're
speak
not
the
practicing.
language.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
It's
interesting
really
because
bizarre.
I think for it's it's hard for me and you maybe to like get in the head of like a white person, and I mean that in a loving way. I just mean like
I know
we're so
exactly. Yep,
different. Our
of course.
experiences are so different, right? We don't know,
Yep.
but it's like to feel, for instance, like, okay, obviously I don't like what white people stand for recently, right? Like for the last 500 years, like we've been pretty
Mhm.
rough on other people, but that doesn't mean that other people haven't been rough on each other. Like,
On each
let's
other,
not,
yeah. Or
let's not be
yep,
in an illusion. But
yep.
let's just say I don't feel good about it as a white, if I was a white person, of course, you want to look back at like, oh, what about before we were like that? We can't have always been like that, because we're not essentially evil, even though some people think that of us because we've treated people so badly. But like everyone, I think most people want to think that no, we're not essentially bad. Like something happened and we became this way, and we're better now again. That's what most white people think. Like there was a really bad time and now we're kind of getting better again,
And
which
now
is
it's
probably
fine.
it's
Yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah.
kind of
But we
true
have
in a
this whole
way. Like
culture
there's
about
like
like
a
Karens and all sorts of craziness. But like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
cool.
It's
Yeah.
again, I don't know how they but
Right.
and then it's like if you go further back, and this is what I had to do in my West Asian culture, is like, oh, before Islam, that's like older than 1400 years ago, right? And
Yeah.
so for so-called white people, Europoids, they have to go back, I don't know, maybe 2,500 years ago, and maybe
Yeah.
3,000 years ago, to really get to the point where they're living undisturbed the way they were supposed to have been, because
Mhm.
it's for them, it's a ways back, because they've been fucked with for a long time by lots of different
Right.
people. And so they never had a chance to heal, if you really look at that. And so there's trauma upon trauma, and then Christianity came in the mix, which really messed things up, and made things really like kind of high stakes. You go hell or heaven. Like it made everything really kind of like almost like up the ante. You know what I mean? And then also, so I think what I was going to say though is like when you look back, of course you're going to be more attracted to like the Celtic culture, or the, you know what I mean, like those kind of like, or the Roman culture, or something that had some sort of actual glory that seems like you could be proud of it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
okay, and so but like I totally know what you mean. It's like, but they're not necessarily able to touch on those cultures either, because that's when you realize, okay, a lot of those guys have been done badly for thousands of years, so we
Yeah.
don't even know what they were like before, because even the current so-called Celtic culture is like a kind of a hybrid of what happened before, what happened to the culture, and the English, what do you call it, like the Anglification of all of Western Europe, kind of the and so I feel like I feel for them, because like when you look back at those times, and then they get ridiculed for being like, I'm actually Celtic and I really understand, and
But that's
right,
what
and
I
then we
mean.
make fun of them. We're like, oh,
We make
okay.
fun of them. Like, I feel bad. Like, I wonder what their take is on it, because like this, I'm like, well, they need to claim that they're Canadian, but they need to claim that they're like, well, I claim that I'm this, or my dad is
I
this, or my
think this
grandpa is
is
this. I'm like,
I think what
there
we're
is no
getting
sense of
to.
culture. Like,
Yeah.
if I find some white folk, are you going to help me interview them? Because now I'm curious to see, like, in a historical way, like what
I'm also curious. And that's
right?
a really funny. If I find
Like,
someone,
what
yes, if you find some random white folk, we can talk to
I feel like I could probably
them.
find some.
But no, it's really good, because honestly, I feel like this is something I'm noticing, is again, similar thing. A so-called white person really gets into, say, their Viking culture, or um, into their Celtic culture, or into their Roman culture, right? The same way. Now look at this, and this is not exactly the same way, of course, for many reasons. But like, how, like, what a hotep is?
No.
Like, it's an African American person that's really into Egypt. Like, they're always,
Okay.
they're super into like
That's a whole
African
other
things.
thing,
It's
man.
it's it's
Egypt is
kind
a
of a derogatory
beast.
term,
Okay.
and it's used by black people against those like hippie black people, right? And so in the same way,
Interesting.
you get like the trailer pagans get called out, because they're like, oh, you're not really Celtic, but you're like a poor white person that just doesn't want to be a poor white person, so you're pretending to be this Celtic prince or whatever, right? And so they're getting and it's sad, because it's similar on the other end. So like, we're not really supporting each other and finding our cultures, right? Because often what happens is, when you first get into it, you're like too into it, and people are like, ew, why are you like
Yeah,
this?
like,
Like,
slow it down. You live in
too
a double
much.
wide,
Yeah.
like, bump your
Right. And
brakes.
so it's funny, because maybe, like, I think it's hilarious. Like,
It's so
um
funny.
it's really funny. And so again, they try, and
Wow.
then they do get cut down, because people are like, come on, are you serious? Like, you got the fucking pyramid on your head. Like, what are you doing? Like,
Why is it
right?
on your head? Like, is it a
And I
foam
love that
block? Like,
shit.
what's
I love
happening?
when
Where'd you
anyone's
get
like
that?
fully committed, but like, it's
Like,
funny though. Like, I gotta
get out of
laugh.
the gift shop. Oh my God, that's so
Yeah, like why are you wearing like Halloween? You wearing a Halloween outfit? You're not fucking into this, bro.
right.
It's tight. But at the same time, like, I also am happy when people find something that they can be that passionate about, where they're like, no, I don't give a fuck.
100%.
For me, this represents this and this, and they're cool with that. But like, you
Yeah.
know, I think so. What this kind of leads me to, though, is that all of these types of identity are secondary, right?
Right.
Like, um, no matter how proud or how cool or how like constructive or how destructive or whatever it is, it's secondary to your real identity, right?
It's
And
yeah.
so yeah, it's another part of this shell of this time. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It belongs to the body, is what I'm saying. So the culture, of course, is part of the soul and everything, but it's like, it's very much relates to the physical world, right? And
You're right.
you are not just physical. You're definitely immensely multidimensional. So I don't even think it's necessary now to be like, I'm this and this and this. Like, you're trying to like kind of, it's almost like you're reinforcing the ego, or the I consciousness, because I am like, I belong to this other thing. There's like a relative sort of situation I have with it, and but the thing is, the truth and like the real consciousness of the world, which we call God or we call whatever,
Yeah.
it's not relative, right? It's absolute.
No.
So your actual consciousness, your actual identity is closer to that. So
Than it
but
is to like separate. It's yeah. Okay. So like, because when I was growing up, someone told me, like, if everyone just had mixed babies, the world would be a beautiful, totally
yeah,
relaxed place. And like, if we all were just kind of like beautiful shades of beige,
yeah.
I wonder if we would. Okay, now you
Yeah,
got
we
me
would
thinking. 'Cause
stop
I'm like,
being like, yeah, we wouldn't worry so much about the details and be like, oh, we're all
yeah,
brown, we're all the
yeah,
same
like we're
color,
all just. But here's what's also crazy is that we are just shades of flippin' brown, subject to the equator. Like, when
Yeah,
did we forget that the color of our skin was based on the region that we live in
yeah,
respect to the sun? Like,
exactly. And then when you think about it too, like, white people are white because their skin can take more vitamin D from less sun than a brown person's, for whatever
that's
reason.
it. Yeah, like
They
my
have some
son,
sort
like
of they have some
he
sort of
needs
thing for that.
Yeah, like from a medical standpoint, my children have to have twice as much vitamin D as like, you know, when they get like the baby drops when they're just brand new,
They need
they
more,
get
yeah. So they
they
have
need
to eat
more.
meat.
Yeah,
They're more likely to need to eat meat and fish and things like that as well. So
right.
that's another thing we see. The global South traditionally wasn't an overeating meat like they are now, but
No,
like right, it was part of the diet, but it wasn't as necessary, right?
they
Whereas
still
here
don't really
in the
rely
north,
on it as much as the North. There's no way, Matt. Like
yeah, well,
you could
especially
not
the
get.
north, like Scandinavia, like just imagine how little sun a lot of those people get. Like they need fish, they need fish liver and shit like that.
Yeah,
See, for me, I'm like, I would rather live somewhere where shit's just growing out of the ground that I can eat. It would be so much easier, you know.
yeah. That is. It's funny because it feels like that's the goal, but that should just be the standard.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad that we had that, and people were like, "No, it is
No,
mine."
yeah,
God
it's
damn it!
totally bizarre, man.
It's
Like it's
hilarious, but
totally
you know,
bizarre.
I think we can laugh about it now because that's all we can really do.
Yeah,
But you know, I used to get kind of a little frustrated when people were like, "Well, you know, this stuff happened everywhere," and it did, and you know, and once you start looking into it, you're like, man, humanity is just a succession of conflicts and resolutions and new starts, and you know, it's never really been on some sort of even keel. It's always people competing for things, and that's okay. I think it seems to be like we're getting hopefully to a point where we've seen enough of the bigger picture where we see, okay, I get what this is now, kind of thing, you know, like, and
yeah,
I hope that's what we're getting to as a society where it's like, okay, competition's cool, it breeds innovation or whatever, sure, you know, but
yeah.
like it also does all of these other things, and you can see it when you zoom out enough, you know, and so maybe it's
That's
more about
yeah.
working together and not trying to always outdo each other and trying to prove that we're so good and all this kind of stuff, where just being is great, you know, and so I'm hoping that that does happen, and it's kind of happening. Partially, the more we have excess, the more I think our true consciousness becomes almost like like not offended, but like shocked by the excess. Like some of the images I've seen in the last year or so, you know, it's like, okay, like it gives you like this is a sign of the times, like, you know, like, and I'm not saying not just the war porn that we're shown whenever we need to be angry, but
Right.
like, but that as well, like when you're like, oh, like that is actually happening on this earth, people are watching it and no one can do anything.
And no,
it
yeah,
it, it puts you in a perspective like, oh, so if that happened to me, um my expectation is that nothing will happen. Good to know, right? So those same
right.
companies that are running the drone grid bombing and killing civilians in Israel or in
Mhm.
Palestine, those same companies also run the drone grid here. So when the time comes, if the time comes, we're equally vulnerable, if not more vulnerable, because we have no idea it's even happening. Those guys
I
grew
was
up
just
in a
gonna
war.
say, but at least I mean, at least like if it's historically been an issue, then you can kind of prepare for something. In
You're
a
on the TV.
situation
Yeah,
like Canada, where we don't really
we're
rely on our
sitting ducks.
military for
Sitting
anything.
ducks. We
Yeah, I
trust
mean,
those
everything is
motherfuckers.
a conspiracy theory, and then you just
Yeah,
shotgun some beers and watch hockey. Like, there's not really a whole lot of like
exactly.
a whole lot of concern when it comes to,
And they
um,
literally will let them wrap the piano wire around our throats slowly and gently, and we're like, oh, what are they doing? Oh, that kind
right?
of feels weird, you know. And then you're like, oh shit, he's trying to fucking kill me. Like, and
Yeah,
so I think that's kind of where I'm like, when's that gonna happen? Where we
when's that?
go
Well, it's not, I mean,
snap out of the fucking doze, like, oh shit, like this is actually, if I don't do something now, you know, and I don't mean like necessarily something physical, but like maybe, you know, but
I hope so. Mo, I hope so, man. Like we
I
got babies
know,
out here. Like I hope so.
I
Because the
know,
thing is, like, I'm not really ready to leave the situation where like I don't know if my kids are educated or uneducated enough to really question what the heck is happening. Like it's
yeah,
nice to know that conspiracy theories have now become the standard of just like life and normal conversation.
yeah,
That's great. That's great. It's a great starting point.
yeah,
But like have we moved far enough away from like or
no.
maybe close enough to the fire to be like, that's hot.
I'm not sure. I think it's hard for us to, again, we're sitting in the what's left of the privileged sort of West, right? Like we're
Right.
kind of one of the last places where shit's not too bad yet, right? And so we're still in that sort of like we're living on credit, like we're floating above the lava, right? The floor is lava, but we're kind of like, oh shit, so we got a little boost. Like I don't know how, but right? Like whereas some
Yeah.
places have been in there for so long, right? And so I think they're more in a different reality than we are. We're still kind of in this like, oh, well, they wouldn't do that to us. Like, those
Right.
brown people must be crazy. That's why that's happening there. It's not, we
Yeah.
wouldn't have just look how civilized
Freaking
we are.
brown people. I
And
mean,
and I mean,
honestly.
and I mean, POC also in these white privileged countries kind of by default feel like that. Like, oh, well, it wouldn't happen to me because I live here and it's safe, like, and
Yeah,
so it
meanwhile,
just,
people are terrified of like RCMP and we don't call them anyways because we don't want our neighbors to get
oh,
mashed up. I
and
mean,
exactly, and so even that's happening, yet we're still in such denial. So there's this, and I think in Canada maybe it's, I don't know. There's this sort of like weird leftover sort of like pro-imperialist sort of sentiment, like for king and country, that kind of shit. That's,
yeah,
like every November 11th is all that stuff. And I'm not, again, I, no disrespect to the
no
dead. I think
disrespect.
they
No,
they
no,
did
of
what they
course
could
not.
do, and a lot of them did heroic things, and a lot of them had no choice. A lot of them were
Yeah.
conscripted. It wasn't even their fucking choice, so it wasn't
Yep.
their fault. But a lot of them went in there still thinking, okay, well, it's not what I would have chosen, but I'm going to fight for my country.
Yeah.
And those died, it's not their fault. But when you see those things, and it always has this like very pro-colonial, pro-imperial kind of vibe, like, any sort of marches, any sort of like, Remembrance Day, like it's really honoring that we supported the fucking colonizer as a
Yeah.
country. Like, it's really honoring that, like, our boys were good enough to die for the king. Like, it literally, if you really break it down to what it is, it's like, oh, that's what you're doing, and there's no way I can get behind that. I come from a long line of tribal troublemakers. I'm not. We don't believe
No,
in
we're
kings.
rebels out here,
We
man.
don't
Like
believe
we're
in
rebels.
kings,
Like,
right?
what are you talking about?
But
Yeah.
that's what I mean. I just don't. I don't even believe in any legitimacy of any one family to do any of
Hmm.
that. So to me, I'm like, you're on some bullshit anyway. But
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what I think anyway, obviously. But like, that's
Same.
how I. So for me, I'm like, oh, I've always seen it as what it is, which is like,
Yeah.
like it's just posturing. It's like, oh, okay, we'll go run into battle for you, and what are we getting out of that? We're still a
It's the
colony
same
of
with
Britain.
Mother's Day, man. Like, never mind battle. Well, Mother's Day. Like, I was
Mm.
like, good, you got to get the flowers and the cards and the this and that. I birthed babies. I thought it was important until
Yeah,
someone was like, it was a Hallmark holiday to celebrate the moms that gave their sons to the war. Actually,
it was it. I didn't even know that.
yeah,
Oh my god.
yeah. Like it was made. Yeah, it was made to like kind of. It was used. It was manufactured as a buffer. Like, this is what we're gonna do to say sorry, and like we're just gonna make. And I
Oh,
was like, what? Like, there was not a Mother's Day pre World War II, right? Like, that's
that's
disgusting.
fucking creepy, bro.
Yeah, right. But we all
And
anticipate like what our kids can make, even though our kids can make us stuff from home every day. But we don't
yeah,
pay
yeah,
attention to
yeah.
any of that. We
And
wait
here's
for
the
one
thing.
day.
And here's the thing. Yes, we appreciate mothers, and
It's not
um,
that. I just mean like,
no, no, for sure. That's
how
what I
come
mean. It's
there's,
like there is ways to do that is actually more impactful, also, right? Like
yeah,
chocolates and little like dinky things they make at school are like cool. It's the
Jesus
thought that
Christ, call
counts.
your mom.
But like,
But that's what makes me so angry about the topic is that, like, okay, first of all, we make our kids feel weird, like they need to make this gift.
yes,
But like, moms, hello, they're sitting at the dinner table every single night, man.
exactly.
Pull out the crayons, pull out the coloring stuff, pull out the Uno
Yeah.
cards. Like, you want those moments? You have access to it all the time. You don't
And then
need a day.
too, like if you believe in the mother, it's kind of like, how about we honor the divine mother? Like, how about
Right.
we also set in a practice into our family where we understand what the divine feminine is, like instead of just mom, because mom's a human being, right? Like she's also divine, but like I just mean like we have to understand what like the greater sense of a woman is, like the mother goddess, like the beginning of all creation. Like that's, to me, that's what Mother's Day is. But like
That's what Mother's
like,
Day
but we
should
don't do
be.
Mother's Day in that same way, right? Like,
No,
but
no,
like
no.
that's in our family. That's our consciousness towards women. So it's like I'd much rather them, when they think of mother, they don't just think of their own mom or their grandma, but they're thinking of
Right.
the mother herself, right? And because
Mm.
that's one half of life. That's the magnetism to the electricity. That's the the matter to the spirit. It's like it's the necessary apparent opposite. And so same way as father, right? And so again, like this brings me to like when we're talking about religions, um the three Abrahamic religions, they, well, not necessarily, but definitely Christianity and Islam, they very very much focus, at least culturally, on God being male. They don't necessarily
Mhm.
even say it like that in their books, but a lot of the majority of the believers, for some reason, have, especially Christians, believe in a male God, and they don't talk about a female like an opposite or like a complementary energy towards that, right? And
Yeah.
so you have to kind of decipher that and be like, oh, could you possibly have a religion where you're only worshiping half of all creation? Like, is that even like, does that actually make sense? It's like having a rocket that only has the one part of the fuel, but not the other part of the fuel. You know what I mean?
But the excuse is just like, my God is a selfish God, right? Or I'm a selfish human, so I'm only
Or it's
going
like
to.
Mary is the what do you call it? The mother that carries the child. Like she's like the replacement kind of almost. She's like you're supposed to adore Mary as
Yeah.
the portal of God, as if but she's not the goddess. Like you know what I mean? It's like a weird kind of.
Oh, I never
But
really thought about that. Like she did all the work, but we're not going to respect her as like a goddess entity. She just
no,
gets to
she's
be
still a
like,
human, but she's divine because she's she gave birth to God. But yeah, it's kind of a
oh
funny thing
no.
because but she doesn't satisfy the requirement of what a goddess is. She's not the creator of the universe. You know what I mean? The mother goddess is literally the womb in which universes are born, right? It's a very large creature we're
Right.
talking about. A very large being that we're talking about, and it's not just even it's conscious, but it's really like a force of nature. And so, but like
Mm.
when they talk about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, that's when they're talking about the goddess, the Holy Ghost, right? She's the energy of God. She's the one that does all the things that God wants to do. He can't do any of those without her. He can't act in the world, right?
Right.
So
No,
this is what the
he
mother
needs to take
goddess is. So
advantage.
like in
Right.
all religions, her part is actually figuring out the logistics and making it happen, right?
Right.
The consciousness aspect, which is often seen as the male part, is the one that comes up with ideas, but they're nothing without her. They can't
Right.
create, they can't exist, right? Same way as electricity without magnetism has no use. They can't do anything with it. It
Right.
needs to be held and controlled and put in a certain place to be used.
Hmm.
And so that's, you know what I mean? Like there's an essential binary that's a good thing. And in this like non-binary age, we got to think about the essential binaries that are like what make up creation, which are really good. You know what I mean?
I heard something that, oh man, I wish I could remember what it was. I heard that's right here, and it was like, oh no, I don't want to butcher it because I feel like it's such a touchy culture nowadays that I don't want to like upset anybody. But it was actually like a commercial that was based solely on like it said like something about like biologically female, but how it like complemented like no, I'm gonna save that for another episode so that I can make
Yeah,
you come
yeah. If you
on the
find it,
show.
I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I'm gonna keep that for another day because I feel like if we unpack that, because I'm already late
yeah.
for work to be
Well, for
honest.
sure. I think the reason I think I even brought that up is when you think about like the defining characteristics of kind of like the belief systems or cultural kind of practices of the West, they're all based
Hmm.
on Christianity. Even though most Westerners
Yeah.
wouldn't count themselves as practicing Christians,
No,
that part, that story, that everything is so part and parcel of the whole culture. Like everything, you
that's
know
the
what I mean? Like we
structure
all
that they
know the
use.
story for some reason. Like
Hmm.
a lot of people are like, I'm not a Christian, but they can tell you the whole Advent story, right?
Yes.
They can tell
Yeah.
you all these things that Jesus may have said that they've heard over millions of little movies and little clips of TV
Oh
shows where
gosh,
it's being
right. And
quoted.
everyone's
So
interpretation of them, and yeah, yeah,
sure,
yeah, for
sure,
sure, for
it's
sure.
become almost a stereotype of what the West is that kind of like weird what do you call it, like Bible thumping sort of thing, because
Yeah.
they went around thumping Bibles, of course. But so it's like with
Yeah.
yeah, right. And so let's just say even without all the bad things that they did, that's just part of like how we look at the world, whether we like it or not, right?
Yeah.
Even if you don't believe in Jesus or in heaven or hell, you're aware of it as a concept and it's fucking with you, right? Because like even if you don't believe it, it's like, well, what if? Like I've definitely heard this from people that like ex-Catholics or other people like, well, I don't know, like I just can't get rid of the idea, the doubt
But
that maybe I'm wrong and they're right, and then maybe there is hell, and I hate that.
right,
And so
right.
they'll change their behavior even though they don't actually believe it, just in case. It's like a superstition now. Do you know what I mean?
God, what a thing though, because can you imagine being so sure like that, even if it was true or false, it didn't really matter, and then living your life right up until the last second, and then you're like, no, I'm gonna hesitate from maybe this possibly really cool thing because
Yeah,
of stuff that I learned back in like grade school, or like this idea that was
exactly.
like Sunday school. Oh, that's, I don't know. I got really lucky because my social standing with religion was basically that we were just a snow globe on somebody else's desk. And
Okay.
then, I mean, you could apply that to anything. It didn't really matter, right? Like like religion kind of took a back seat because it really didn't matter. Like if we're just a snow globe on somebody else's desk, then basically everybody's right and everybody's wrong. It didn't really matter.
I mean, that's not a bad way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. And I feel spoiled that way because then it didn't come with all the extra moving pieces to it. Like I didn't have to really take anything else into consideration, right?
That is pretty cool. I don't know how you got so lucky.
My dad.
And I think for me,
rad.
I was raised by an atheist. My dad was in prison and he was also an atheist.
Right.
But my mom was an atheist and they were raised in very Muslim kind of families, but also grew up in a country that had been colonized by Islam for 1400 years and had gone through lots of different stages of like, you know, moderation and non-moderation in the religion. But so I was lucky in a way that my mom didn't impose any of that stuff on me. She actually told me she didn't really believe it. She's like, when I kept asking about the origin and going further back, she's like, well, now you're getting to the point where scientists don't know anything. The only people that say they know something are religious people, right? And so we talked about that.
So here's what's crazy is my dad was actually groomed as like a Jehovah Witness, like higher, like I don't know how high you can go in the Kingdom Hall, but so for him, like his whole life was geared towards him being like a massive representative of that community. And then he, for whatever reason, he played bass and just, that was it. He was like, this does not make sense. Like something here isn't really sitting right with me. You can't, and basically what it came down to, and like, I don't want to speak on his behalf, but he was like, one tree does not grow everything that you need. And I was like, but it does though. Like all trees do grow what we need, right? And so like that's what spurred him on to kind of move forward with learning about different types of like cultures and religion and why, because he only had one idea of it. And he was like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know.
I feel like you gotta
kind of put
the pieces together. You gotta put the pieces together. Because it's almost like it's missing like so much stuff, you know?
Yeah, he was like, it covers enough that you could totally pay, 10% tide and get on with the rest of your life. But like, nah, I don't know. You know what, Mo? I gotta let you go, sweetheart. I'm just looked at the time, and I am still. There's still lots to do here. There's still lots to do at the Metal Fest. I gotta go help.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I forgot you're at work actually.
Yeah, there's definitely like a whole other thing happening in the background. So. Okay,
awesome. Well, it was great. It's great talking to you again, and I hope everything goes well. With the show. It sounds amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And let's. I'm gonna send you some ideas, and if you got time, happy Men's Mental Health Month, first of all.
Oh, thanks.
And if you got time, I got another day that I would love to throw you back in here to kind of finish the conversations that we're having before the end of Men's Mental Health Month.
Yeah, sure. Give me a shout. I'm kind of wrapping up school in the next few weeks, and then I'm around. So.
All right, cool. Sounds good. Thank you so much for joining me, Mo. I appreciate it. It's so good chatting with you.
Thank you for having me, and see you soon.
Yeah, sounds good, hon. Bye.
Bye.